Nostradamus's cryptic verses, les prophecies, have been scoured for clues to history's future for 5 centuries. Alleged predictions span critical moments, the rise of Hitler, the French Revolution, and modern tragedies, including 9/11 and the COVID-19 pandemic. Even in the 21st century, Nostradamus remains a recurring media phenomenon. Public fascination drives new articles and broadcasts that attempt to align his vague quatrains with current events and future predictions, generating both intense interest and skepticism. We must ask, who was the man behind this enduring myth?
Nostradamus was a product of the chaotic 16th century. Europe faced crisis, apocalyptic fervor was mainstream, and astrology was considered a legitimate science, not superstition. The lines between medicine, the occult, and prediction were entirely blurred for his contemporaries. We contrast the supernatural legend with the historical reality. He was a physician expelled for being an apothecary, known for fighting the plague. Despite the myths, historical documents show he lost his family and explicitly rejected the title of prophet in his own register.
Nostradamus's prophecies were a synthesis, not foresight. The method involved 4 key elements: literary plagiarism of ancient works and histories, astrological synthesis using comparative horoscopy, deliberate obscurity to avoid persecution, and a non-chronological order that ensured the quatrains were adoptable to any era. Post-diction, or retroactive clairvoyance, is fitting vague prophecies to events after they have occurred, creating the illusion of foresight. This cognitive trick is driven by confirmation bias, our tendency to search for and favor information that confirms our existing beliefs. The Hister prophecy is mistakenly associated with Adolf Hitler. The reality is that Hister is the classical Latin name for the Danube River. This connection was retroactively manufactured after World War II by fitting a proper name to a similar-sounding geographical term. Case Study 2 highlights the 9/11 Nostradamus prophecy hoax. This chillingly specific verse spread rapidly but was quickly debunked. The true revelation: it was created in 1997 by a student to demonstrate how vague prophecy could be weaponized following a tragedy. This slide details Nostradamus's most specific, failed prediction, the King of Terror's arrival in July 1999. Believers conveniently ignore this clear miss because vague verses are easier to retrofit. The subsequent attempt to save the prophecy after 9/11 perfectly illustrates the goalpost moving inherent when trying to justify post-diction. The fundamental human need to find meaning in tragedy drives the spread of prophecy. Whether it is the 16th century printing press bringing order during plague, or the 21st century internet spreading modern folklore during digital anxiety, the core need remains constant. Only the medium has changed. Nostradamus became psychological warfare during World War II. Goebbels used fake quatrains to demoralize occupied nations. The Allies countered immediately, producing pamphlets and MGM propaganda films using the same myth to boost morale. The cryptic text was a deliberate defense, allowing survival in the dangerous 16th century. This obscurity is the Sears paradox. It acts as a universal adapter, making vague prophecies applicable to any event, from the French Revolution to the digital age. They endure because they can never be proven false. The story of Nostradamus is truly about our timeless human search for pattern and certainty in an unpredictable world. His prophecies reflect universal anxieties and our quest to see ourselves. The Architecture of Prophecy is a forensic deconstruction of the famous centuries. We examine these texts as a high-stakes case file, tracing key predictions and historical misinterpretations from the death of kings to the concepts of the new city. This slide profiles Michel de Nostradamus, the physician and astrologer who mastered survival through ambiguity. To evade accusations of heresy, he intentionally obscured his prophetic centuries using a polyglot mix, ensuring plausible deniability by chronologically scrambling the text.
Case File 1 investigates the Keystone Myth, specifically Century I, Quatrain 35. The poem describes the young lion overcoming the old one in single combat, resulting in a cruel death after his eyes burst in a cage of gold. This is cited as the prediction for King Henry II's death in 1559.
The fatal joust occurred in June 1559 between King Henry II and the Count of Montgomery. A splinter from a shattered lance pierced the king's visor, entering his eye and brain. Henry II died 10 days later, ending his reign abruptly.
The verdict confirms post-diction. A 55-year gap separated Henry II's 1559 death and the prophecies' 1614 attribution. Analysis shows the link was made after the fact. Cage of gold was poetic license for steel visors, and two fleets was linguistically twisted to mean wounds to support the resulting narrative. Case File 2, The Trap of Specificity, concerns Nostradamus' Century X, Quatrain 72. This passage, displayed here, predicts a king of terror arriving in the 7th month of 1999. This specific date is a notable anomaly within his collected works, providing an exact point of failure or fulfillment.
The apocalyptic fear centered on Y2K and catastrophic events like meteor strikes, but the reality was simple. The date passed. Specificity led to failure. Even attempts by apologists to redefine the meaning of terror or host could not obscure the fundamental fact that the prophecy was a definitive miss.
We analyze Case File 3, The New City, based on Century 6, Quatrain 97. The text speaks of fire approaching the Great New City at 45 degrees. The map visually confirms New York, the target location, sits directly on the 45th North parallel. Interpretation fails geographically. New York City is 5 degrees south of the 45th parallel, a 470-kilometer latitude error. Furthermore, Cité Neuve translates to local sites like Villeneuve or Naples. The core context remains Eurocentric, focusing on local wars and volcanoes, not the distant Americas.
The prophecy regarding the two steel birds is a clear fabrication and does not exist in the original text. Its origin traces back to a 1997 student essay and internet sharing. Our key insight is that human trauma creates a strong demand for meaning, enabling these widely shared forgeries to persist. Our core mechanism is linguistic elasticity, the toolkit used for prophecy. This relies on 3 pillars feeding into the event: intentional vagueness, using keywords like fire or Mars for universal fit; anagrams, such as interpreting Hister as Hitler; and retrofitting, which applies the Texas sharpshooter fallacy for post hoc validation. The psychology of prediction reveals that belief trends peak during major trauma, like World War II or 9/11. This functions as a coping mechanism. We seek the illusion of a script, which implies a greater underlying order, reducing the perception of chaos. This summary of findings reveals clear patterns. Case I was a post-diction, where the link was forged 55 years late. Case 2, a falsifiable specificity, failed to materialize on the predicted date. Finally, Case 3 was identified as a projection and hoax, involving wrong geography and fabricated text. The cycle of future interpretation continues into 2026 and beyond. New readings connect prophecies like pestilence in Tuscany to COVID-19 and 7 ships/galleys to South China Sea tensions. As long as fear of the future persists, the need for Nostradamus and similar interpretations will endure. We conclude with the final verdict. Remember this powerful idea. The future is not some prophecy predetermined in the stars. It is rewritten every single day through our decisions, eventually to be cataloged in the history books. We are the architecture of our own fate. At 45 degrees reveals the architecture of prophecy. We decode Nostradamus, examine the concept of the new city, and trace the subtle echoes of 9/11. Remember, the true prophecy lies within the reader,
not the text
The
itself.
eternal recurrence is visualized through the Ouroboros, linking historical disaster to the glitching modern world. Nostradamus, in this context, does not predict the future, but rather the nature of persistent human fear. As he wrote, "The world too late will be tired of him."
The core analysis relied on the 1555 and 1568 editions of Les Prophéties by Nostradamus. Supporting research included philological analysis of the original text, historical context regarding the Great Fire of London, and critical studies focused on specific predictions, such as the 1999 eclipse.
Michel de Nostradamus' 942 poetic quatrains are history's most enduring enigma. We will deconstruct him as a master of the four-line stanza, analyzing how his cryptic verses are interpreted and became a massive verbal puzzle for future generations.
The quatrain is a versatile four-line stanza used across many poetic traditions. Key examples include the Persian rubai, the heroic stanza, and the ballad stanza. Its adaptability is why figures like Nostradamus chose this flexible, self-contained format to house his prophetic visions, making them ripe for interpretation. Nostradamus's primary motivation was profit, not clear prophecy. He leveraged sources like astrology and scrying to create the obscure quatrains. This cryptic style was a conscious choice designed to maximize patronage while avoiding the specific, falsifiable claims that could lead to persecution by the Inquisition.
Case Study 1 examines Quatrain 35 regarding King Henry II's death. The popular interpretation fails under critical scrutiny. Historically, Henry was not symbolized by a lion, helmets were not soft gold, and the injury did not burst his eyes. Ultimately, the quatrain's ambiguity allows interpreters to force the fit.
The Mabus quatrain demonstrates extreme textual manipulation. Interpreters use flexible anagram rules, linking the name to diverse figures like Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden, and George W. Bush. The prophecy's power is found not in the text, but in the limitless potential for post-event manipulation, fitting any villain or event after the fact.
This case study is the outright failure, the King of Terror in 1999. A specific quatrain predicted an apocalyptic event in July 1999. When that testable date passed uneventfully, the prophecy failed dramatically. Later attempts to retrofit this failure to the 9/11 attacks highlight the post hoc rationalization used to maintain claims of infallibility.
Nostradamus' legend is a source of modern disinformation. The 9/11 Two Steel Birds prophecy was written by a student demonstrating vagueness. Hoax 2 involved the absurd Gangnam-style apocalypse prediction. This self-perpetuating myth lends false authority to any invented prophecy, fueled by our human desire to find order in chaos.
This catalog showcases several key quatrains and their subsequent vernacular interpretations. We see I-14 linked to the French Revolution and I-60 to Napoleon. Other verses, like 2-5, are interpreted as modern predictions, such as the submarine. The consistent pattern is that vague language demands significant interpretive leaps to connect the prophecy to specific historical events, like the assassinations of JFK and RFK.
The illusion of accuracy in prophecy stems from four core biases. We rely on vague, ambiguous language that fits any event, and apply retrofitting, applying interpretation only after events occur. This system is cemented by arbitrary textual manipulation and the ongoing proliferation of popular hoaxes.
Nostradamus' true legacy is not prediction, but the creation of a massive verbal jigsaw puzzle reflecting the human need to find meaning in chaos. His prophecies survive because they mirror our fears and hopes, inviting each new generation to interpret them.
Nostradamus did not write linear history. He wrote in cycles. We utilize mirror mode to analyze these reflections. By comparing the first reflection, the Great Fire of London, 1666, with the second reflection, the Chelyabinsk event, 1999, we triangulate the trajectory of our current era.
This temporal reflection methodology compares the 1666 internal combustion event, point A, to the predicted 1999 external threat, point B. The central vector highlights our current geopolitical reality, demonstrating the core principle that history never repeats itself, but the patterns clearly rhyme. Quatrain 2.51 is central to the 1666 mathematical code. Decoding the phrase 23 is the 6 arithmetically, 20 times 3 plus 6 yields 66. This high-precision result points directly to the year 1666, confirming the prophecy's widely cited link to the Great Fire of London.
Examining the ground truth, the catastrophic hit resulted in the medieval city's destruction, including St. Paul's Cathedral. The true glitch, the cause, was a simple spark in a Pudding Lane bakery, far removed from the dramatic prediction of a sudden lightning-based catalyst.
Quatrain 1072 offers the only explicit date within the entire corpus, naming the year 1999 and the 7th month. This specific timeline is interpreted as a prediction of an external sky threat or apocalyptic event. This is intentionally contrasted with the mere date 1666, which signified an internal fault.
The slide contrasts Y2K fears and the July 1999 prophecy with the actual void. While the literal apocalypse missed, 1999 brought real upheaval, war through the NATO bombings in Kosovo, and the accelerated rise of Vladimir Putin, ushering in a new era of strong authority in the East.
The Chelyabinsk airburst of 2013 delivered 500 kilotons of energy, 30 times the power of Hiroshima. This 18-meter object entered the atmosphere at 40,000 miles per hour before exploding at a 30-kilometer altitude, providing critical technical telemetry. Our audit confirms a literal superbullet event from the sky, as confirmed by the Chelyabinsk analysis. While the geographic location matches historic Golden Horde territory, the King of Terror aspect is a partial match, representing widespread damage and panic. The overall verdict suggests structural consistency, but temporal displacement.
The Mars factor slide maps geopolitical conflict through a cosmic lens. It details the progression from the 1999 Kosovo War and the rise of Putin to the 2013 meteor strike near a Russian industrial zone. This 500 kiloton event precedes the present conflict in the East, aligning with Nostradamus' linking of cosmic events to martial periods.
The fear of invisible threats spans centuries. In 1666, it was the unexpected lightning strike. Today, it is the blind spot, celestial impacts invisible to sensors until the moment of impact. This vector similarity highlights our continuous struggle against unannounced, sudden dangers. This slide outlines the vector similarity of systemic collapse. We compare the 1666 religious strife that fractured institutions with modern geopolitical miscalculations. This imbalance is the echo, the rise of Eastern power dynamics actively challenging Western hegemony and the notion of the just.
This slide, titled The Physics of the King, details the impact of an 11,000-ton LL chondrite asteroid. The resulting shockwaves circled the globe twice. The quatrain reminds us that we are physical beings subject to these universal laws, emphasizing that all, even the king, ultimately descend to the dust.
The word Anglemois is decoded as a dual reference. It points to Mongoliois and the Russian steppe location of Chelyabinsk. Simultaneously, it references Angoumois, linking to the French king's region. Ultimately, the prophecy merges this location with the concept of a returning Khan-like figure.
The reflection shows our escalating fragility. 1666 was internal fire, 1999 an external threat from the sky. The sky struck during global conflict in 2013. Now we are at the convergence point, facing both environmental fragility and active global conflict simultaneously.
The orbiting king represents systemic vulnerability. Historical events like the 1666 near miss and the 1999 metaphorical hit validate this pattern. Chelyabinsk serves as the physical echo.
This prophecy warns that the King of Terror constantly orbits, hidden. Opening our case file from September 1666, we examine the catastrophe of the Great London Fire. Our focus is the anatomy of a prophecy. We will deconstruct Nostradamus's alleged prediction of this event, specifically Century 2, Quatrain 51.
This map details the Great Fire of London, September 1666. Originating in Pudding Lane, the fire devastated a medieval city built of wood and pitch, destroying 13,000 houses, 87 churches, and St. Paul's Cathedral. In the aftermath, survivors sought meaning in prophecy.
Century 2, Quatrain 51 provides crucial evidence. It predicts a fault in London, describing a burning through the lightning of 23's the 6. It then mentions the ancient lady falling from her high place, followed by members of the same sect being killed.
Exhibit A reveals the numerical interpretation. 20 times 3 plus 6 equals 66, completing the date 1666. This precise dating is the bedrock of the prophecy's fame. It is a rare instance where Nostradamus offers a specific year, aligning perfectly with the Great Fire of London.
The discrepancy is clear. The text predicts fire caused by lightning, while the reality points to a bakery oven at Pudding Lane. Historical records confirm the oven fire. Although some argue lightning is a metaphor for divine fire, the literal text fails the forensic fact check. Two theories identify the ancient lady. Theory A points to the architectural site dedicated to Diana, while Theory B suggests a falling statue of the Virgin Mary. Ultimately, the prophecy's central element, the fall from a high place, is crucial, as it perfectly mirrors the actual collapse of the cathedral's roof and walls. The chart highlights the paradox: 13,200 houses destroyed versus only 6 verified human deaths. The phrase "blood of the just" attempts to interpret this property disaster as divine retribution. Theories suggest the true victims were the plague dead, Catholic martyrs, or retribution for King Charles I's execution.
The original source text shows the plague quatrain, LII, immediately precedes a quatrain interpreted as the fire. This proximity directly links Nostradamus's words to the historical sequence, the 1665 Great Plague of London, followed by the 1666 Great Fire.
Prophecy often functions as post-diction. A trauma prompts a search for meaning, enabling a retroactive fit. The 9/11 hoax demonstrates this. A student fabricated a Nostradamus text in 1997, which the public accepted after the tragedy because they needed an immediate explanation. Our slide, Lost in Translation, Cité Neuve, clarifies a common historical misinterpretation. When Nostradamus spoke of a new city facing fire, he referred to Naples, Neapolis, which literally means new city, near Vesuvius. We often incorrectly conflate this term with a new world city, overlaying modern geography onto his Renaissance map. This scale illustrates the problem. We emphasize the hit, like the fabricated math calculation, while minimizing the misses, details like the actual cause or the low death toll. Quatrain 2.51 acts as a Rorschach test, allowing us to find patterns that fit our current understanding, bending the text to align with reality. We open with our presentation title, 4 Lines of Light, the Celestial Observer in the Quatrain. Against the striking backdrop of a prominent moon, we consider Omar Khayyam's reflection on impermanence. The bird of time has but a little way to flutter, and the bird is on the wing. The quatrain is a foundational 4-line stanza, exemplified by AABA, ABAB, and ABBA rhyme schemes. It is found in global traditions, including the Persian rubai and the European ballad. Functioning as a poetic punchline, the quatrain offers a brief, intense encounter with truth.
Omar Khayyam was a mathematician and astronomer who rectified the calendar. His famous poetry reflects his scientific viewpoint. celestial bodies are mechanical markers symbolizing the universe's powerful indifference to human existence. Khayyam saw the moving finger rolling impotently on.
This stanza, the premonition, meditates on persistence versus brevity. The speaker contrasts the eternal, cyclically rising moon of heaven with the brevity of their mortal beloved. The moon is personified as a relentless searcher who will eventually find only an empty garden.
This slide introduces the empty glass, representing the ultimate symbol of the Rubaiyat. The overturned glass signifies a life fully lived, a celebration concluded, and the quiet acceptance of one's journey reaching its peaceful end.
Nostradamus envisioned the clock of doom, where the poetic quatrain was a cipher. In lay prophecies, the moon is redefined as the lunar cycle of fate, a relentless mechanism counting down to political upheaval. The four-line structure encoded his visions and prevented persecution.
The lunar deadline, quatrain 1 to 25, describes a powerful figure honored as a demigod at the full moon, only to be dishonored by the time of the new moon. The core constraint, before the moon finishes its full period, transforms this prophecy into a timing riddle. It predicts a rapid monthly reversal of fate, making the moon the stopwatch of history.
The symbolists, led by Paul Verlaine, redefined the 19th century moon in Clair de Lune. It transitions from indifferent to sad and beautiful. Verlaine utilizes the quatrain's powerful musicality and hypnotic rhythms to mimic moonlight and reflect the poet's profound melancholy, or spleen. This slide details William Wordsworth's The Solitary Star, central to English Romanticism. The accompanying verse introduces the violet, a figure of rare, unappreciated beauty. The star powerfully symbolizes this individual's profound isolation, emphasizing the private tragedy inherent in being a solitary figure.
We turn to Laforgue's The Lunar Reveller. This is meta-commentary on Perrault's Ennui, where the moon is a co-conspirator. The irony replaces despair, as the quote asserts, "I have no designs beyond becoming legendary," turning the traditional tragic figure into a self-aware modern icon.
The moon motif synthesizes into three distinct faces: Khayyam's eternal watcher, Nostradamus's fateful timer, and the romantic's emotional mirror. These perspectives demonstrate how the quatrain structure forces the poet to distill profound complexity into four decisive lines concerning existence, fate, and emotion.
This slide uses Khayyam's lines about the irreversibility of time. The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. While we cannot change fate, we are reminded that poetry
This slide
allows us.
presents Nostradamus Century 6, Quatrain 97, detailing a prophecy from 1555. It describes a severe event occurring at 45 degrees latitude, where the sky will burn and a scattered flame approaches the great new city. Proof of the Normans will be demanded. Following the 2001 attacks, Nostradamus became the top search term online as the public sought ancient explanations for modern trauma. A specific viral quatrain linked scattered flame, great new city, and 45 degrees to the event, interpreting these as the smoke, New York City, and Manhattan's assumed latitude.
This map illustrates the massive distance separating the 40 degrees N and 45 degrees N latitudes, highlighting cities like New York and Bordeaux. For a 16th century astronomer, this 5-degree, 350-mile geographical gap is not merely a small miss. It represents a fundamental and undeniable error in astronomical navigation. The Middle French term Cité Neuve from 1555 translates simply to New City, a common naming convention. Retrospectively linking this to New York City is anachronistic, as NYC did not exist then. The phrase likely derived from the Greek root Neapolis, referring specifically to Naples, Italy. The infamous "two steel birds" quote is a 1997 academic hoax, demonstrating how easily prophecy can be faked, flawed by its use of modern steel. The genuine quatrain VI 97 refers instead to geography and fire approaching the Great New City, containing absolutely no mention of birds or steel construction. The central text, quatrain V97, concludes by demanding proof of the Normans. This historical group, who conquered southern Italy in the 11th and 12th centuries, firmly anchors this poem in European history, severing any logical link to modern 21st century interpretations. Our historical candidate is Naples. Interpreting Cité Neuve as Neapolis resolves the imagery. The descriptions, "the sky will burn" and "scattered flame," directly reference volcanic activity, such as pyroclastic flows. Furthermore, Nostradamus connects the new city to hollow mountains, a clear geological reference to volcanoes like Vesuvius.
The Norman connection map traces the 1139 conquests from Normandy to Naples. Naples sits near the 40th parallel and suffered a Norman invasion followed by volcanic fire. The crucial 45 degrees referenced refers to an astronomical angle or weather line, not a geographic coordinate. Michel de Nostradamus was a plague doctor and astrologer who used green language, a mixture of anagrams and puns designed to be obscure. This vagueness was a survival mechanism protecting him from the Inquisition, allowing his prophecies to remain flexible enough to fit future events.
The mechanics of post-diction rely on retrospective determinism. Nostradamus' predictions are too vague to predict events, instead being retrofitted after major trauma occurs. Ambiguous words like fire or terror function as a collective Rorschach test for anxiety. The authentic 1555 text confirms the work's originality, but the 9/11 prediction is false, relying on fabricated lines. New City refers to Naples or Villeneuve. Sky burning likely indicates volcanic activity or heat waves, and 45 degrees is delamination, indicating catastrophic structural failure. The analysis maps the precise lance trajectory and ocular penetration path, confirming the fatal injury mechanism detailed in our deconstruction of quatrain 35. We are examining Century 1, Quatrain 35, presented on an astrological parchment. The dual language text predicts a single combat where the young lion defeats the old, suffering injury and resulting in a cruel death, highlighted by the anatomical drawings below.
Michel de Nostradamus published Les Prophecies in 1555. This collection of 942 quatrains used a polyglot method and strategic ambiguity to avoid persecution. The underlying goal was to structure chaos and satisfy the psychological demand for pattern recognition. The event was a joust held in July 1559 during a royal double wedding in Paris. It pitted King Henry II, the Old Lion, against Gabriel, Count of Montgomery. The king challenged the younger count to a final single combat, intended to display his royal prowess on the tournament grounds.
Evidence Exhibit A confirms the match. The prophecy describes a young lion overcoming an old one in single combat. Historically, the younger Count Montgomery faced the older King Henry II. Both men carried lion heraldry, and their fatal joust was a recognized single combat ritual. Exhibit B analyzes the fatal trauma of Henry II. Prophecy stated he would burst his eyes in a cage of gold, which matched the gilded helmet he wore. A splinter shattered through the visor, causing 2 initial wounds to the eye and temple that merged into one singular fatal injury. Exhibit C, a cruel death. King Henry II suffered for 11 days before death from sepsis and intracranial injury. The verdict for 16th century witnesses was clear: the fulfillment of the golden cage and pierced eye prophecies, culminating in this cruel death, ruled out coincidence entirely.
The royal endorsement came from Queen Catherine de' Medici, a believer in the occult. Convinced that Nostradamus had foreseen the tragedy, she validated his controversial work. Her legacy was appointing him physician in ordinary, protecting him from the Inquisition and cementing his fame.
The counter-investigation reveals a gap. The popular narrative fits perfectly, but documentary evidence does not. We questioned if quatrain I.35 was linked to Henry II immediately. The reality is that chroniclers like Brantome mentioned a soothsayer, but did not cite Nostradamus or the specific quatrain in 1559.
Forensic analysis highlights a 55-year gap. Nostradamus' 1559 prophecy regarding Henry II's death was vague and conflicting. The specific interpretation validating quatrain 1.35 was first published in 1614. This suggests the prophecy was retrofitted by later supporters to preserve his legacy.
Deconstructing the clues reveals intentional inconsistencies. The lion heraldry detail lacks historical proof and was likely a later addition. The text requires forced translation to turn deux classes into two wounds. Furthermore, the alleged cage of gold was simply steel armor with gold inlay.
The mechanics of belief relies on the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, defining the target post-event. This involves pattern recognition, focusing on hits while ignoring thousands of misses, linguistic elasticity, which redefines archaic terms to fit events, and the keystone myth, where one foundational prediction validates all subsequent claims.
Quatrain I.35 fuels this enduring myth. Believers see a miraculous provision of a singular duel, while skeptics cite retroactive interpretation, printed 55 years too late. Nostradamus' true genius was not in prediction, but in writing poetry open enough to contain all of history.
Seeking order in chaos explores our need to control the future. Nostradamus endures not because he was always right, but because his poetry reflects our collective fears and the inherent fragility of human civilization.
We explore the mirror of time, analyzing Nostradamus' prophecies concerning 1666 and 1999. The visualization connects historical astrological calculations with modern trajectory modeling, demonstrating the precise temporal alignment where these predictive vectors converge.
This slide maps the mechanism of retroactive clairvoyance. Prophecies adapt using a toolkit involving 3 steps centered on the event. First, vague language ensures universal applicability. Interpretation is then forced through anagrams and post hoc retrofitting, essentially drawing the target around the existing shot.
This slide explores the Great London Fire of 1666, referencing Nostradamus' prophecy. The quatrain describes the burning of London and mentions 23's the 6. Mathematically, 20 times 3 plus 6 equals 66, linking directly to the year 1666, the year London burned.
Decoding the distortion reveals a stark contrast. The text claimed the fire was divine retribution caused by lightning. The reality is that it was accidental, starting in a Pudding Lane bakery, resulting in a low death toll, which strongly contradicts the exaggerated historical narratives.
Quatrain 72, titled The King of Terror, is highly significant because it contains the only specific date anchor in all of Nostradamus' prophecies, the year 1999, 7th month. This date correlated directly with the astronomical event known as the total solar eclipse that occurred on August 11, 1999.
Philological forensics reveals that Defrayere signifies a host, and Anglemoise relates to the Duke of Angoulême. This details King Francis I's 1525 captivity, where he was visited by his host, Charles V, completely contradicting the popular Mongol Genghis Khan myth.
This chart details the retroactive pivot after the 1999 prophecy failed. Post 9/11, interpretation shifted. From the sky moved from an eclipse to airplanes, and the King of Terror was retrofitted to bin Laden. This splicing of verses manufactured the Frankenstein quatrain specific to New York City.
Vector 1 details the convergence of 2 major geopolitical factors. First, the return of Mars. Large-scale conventional warfare has re-emerged in Eastern Europe. Second, the rise of Eastern kings, referencing Russia and China, challenging the established Western geopolitical order.
Vector 2 highlights the ancient lady falls. Prophecy states she will fall from her high place, converging with modern institutional collapse. This includes the end of an era following the death of Queen Elizabeth II in 2022, and the systemic crumbling of trust in ancient structures like the monarchy, church, and tradition. Vector 3 presents fire from the sky at 45 degrees. The projected trajectory links the Ukraine border region to New York City, interpreting the ancient text. The evolution of fire has moved from natural events in 1666 to today's major threats: ballistics, drone warfare, and nuclear anxiety. The slide maps the convergence of the 1666 political fault vector and the 1999 aerial threat vector. This intersection defines our current reality: fear of destruction and geopolitical tension. We are living through the Mars reign of the 1999 prophecy, fueled by the institutional instability of 1666.
Our topic is the weight of words, gravity in the quatrain. We are exploring the forces of fate and physics across the works of Khayyam, Nostradamus, and the Romantics. This is a thematic descent, marked by the constant acceleration of gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared, moving us from the stars to the dust.
The structure of stability is based on the quatrain, a four-line stanza in perfect geometric form. Visually represented by these four pillars, the AABA rhyme scheme builds closed loops of logic. This distinct and enclosed structure serves as the architectural foundation for enduring works like the Rubaiyat. This slide, The Watchers of the Sky, juxtaposes Omar Khayyam's mathematical astronomy, visualized by the astrolabe, with Nostradamus's astrological predictions found on a prophetic scroll. This central quote frames the historical tension between viewing the universe as a scientific mechanism and succumbing to fatalistic prophecy.
Khayyam depicts the sky as an inverted, heavy bowl, a claustrophobic trap where humanity crawls. The key insight is that the celestial sphere and the stars are equally impotent, bound by immutable orbital mechanics. Neither the heavenly nor the earthly possess free will. We are all trapped under the same universal laws. The stone and the stars illustrates a dramatic gravitational event. The kinetic energy of this projectile, cited in the Rubaiyat, represents the morning sun displacing the darkness. Fitzgerald interpreted this impact, the flinging of the stone, as an explicit signal, a powerful call to action, to horse. We examine Nostradamus's infamous Descent of the Keen of Terror quatrain, predicting the events of 1999. The visual analysis confirms the central theme, the downward vector. The catastrophe is rooted in physics, signifying a physical object falling from the sky, independent of spiritual interpretations of the King of Terror. The title, The Weight of Wrath, frames how Marlowe uses gravitas, physical weight and seriousness, to describe sin. As the quote from Dr. Faustus illustrates, God's heavy wrath is a tangible burden. This pressing weight guides the protagonist downward, emphasizing that his forbidden knowledge ultimately seals his fate toward hell.
This visual summarizes Baudelaire's concept of the spleen. The low, heavy sky weighs like a lid on the spirit, illustrating how physical atmospheric pressure is converted into psychological depression, squeezing the individual against the earth.
This slide connects the physics of fame to ancient prophecy, detailing pop culture gravity. Nostradamus's predictions for the rise and subsequent the fall mirror the trajectory of careers like Jay-Z and Kanye West's Watch the Throne. What goes up must inevitably descend. This slide introduces Newtonian fate, where Khayyam's philosophy anticipates classical physics. The visual links parabolic projectile motion, defined by force and mass vectors, to the human condition.
We are the ball, objects of mass lacking agency, tossed by gravity and struck by the external force of destiny.
The slide title, The Physics of the Clay, introduces a verse from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam where wet clay murmurs, "Gently, brother, gently pray." This thumping signifies compression. Gravity reclaims biological form, reducing humanity to saturated earth, the raw material for the potter.
The operative verb of this descent is descend. As gravity pulls us beneath the couch of earth, our final resting place is determined, forming the very foundation that supports the next generation, as described by Omar Khayyam. The theme, dust to dust, is drawn from Omar Khayyam's Rubaiyat. We define this as entropy. The repetition of dust simulates the piling up of earth, expressing ultimate gravitational finality. There is no motion here, only weight.
The irreversible vector illustrates time's arrow. The famous line, "The moving finger writes," and having writ, moves on, means our actions are final. Time, like gravity, pulls in one direction only. Once momentum is created, you cannot undo the past.
Grounded by the quatrain, we recognize our brief physical existence. We are beings subject to inescapable laws, from the stone flung to the potter thumping his clay. These 4 lines define the walls of our existence, temporarily. The solar quatrain will analyze themes of awakening, light, and time, focusing on the verse of Omar Khayyam. This visual journey traces the poetic solar arc, from the opening lines of Fitzgerald's Rubaiyat to the dark prophecies of Nostradamus.
The Rubai follows the strict AABA rhyme structure, defining the first, second, and fourth lines as rhyming couplets, while the third line acts as the pivot. This 4-line form, derived from the Arabic word for 4, creates a concise, self-contained idea, often serving as a powerful poetic punchline.
Omar Khayyam was both a celebrated poet and a highly accomplished scientist. While Western audiences know him for his famous verses, he was primarily a renowned mathematician and astronomer. Khayyam used rigorous calculation to rectify the solar calendar with profound precision. This striking visual illustrates the awakening dawn, depicting the famous Rubaiyat verse. The image shows the morning stone flinging light into the bowl of night, scattering the stars, and catching the Sultan's turret in a bright noose, a powerful signal for immediate action.
Fitzgerald's 1859 edition used dynamic, violent imagery, a hunter catching the Sultan's turret in a noose of light. The 1889 revision shifted to the direct, regal image of the sun striking with a shaft of light. While more literal, this revision sacrificed the powerful, aggressive energy of the debut translation.
The theme is the phantom of false morning, technically known as Subi Kazib. This transient light appears roughly an hour before the true dawn. The essential meaning is a call to action. Wake early to discern the illusion, understanding that even the promise of light can be a deceptive trick.
The sun is the ultimate timekeeper, framing the poem around the vernal equinox and Nowruz. The visual metaphor of the rose dissolving into the hourglass highlights the central theme. While the sun brings spring and renewal, it also serves as a poignant reminder of time's relentless passage and ultimate mortality. This presentation examines the sun and the soil. The image contrasts vibrant grapevines with ancient human remains buried beneath, illustrating the cycle of life and decay. The central message is that humanity is dust, returning to clay under the enduring natural order. Shadows of Kings introduces the ephemeral nature of power. The striking image of ruined arches illustrates the battered caravanserai, a metaphor for the world itself. Legendary rulers like Jamshid and Kaikhosru, despite their reign, were merely temporary guests who passed through and are now entirely forgotten. This slide explores Khayyam's rejection of astrology, emphasizing the indifference of the sky. The quote calls the cosmos an inverted bowl that rolls impotently.
Khayyam asserted that stars follow the laws of physics and orbits, not human desires, meaning they are powerless to influence or assist us.
The counterpoint slide introduces Nostradamus's prophetic view of the sun. Quatrain 97 warns that at 45 degrees the sky will burn, signifying destruction. This contrasts Khayyam's benevolent sun with Nostradamus's sun, which is portrayed as a devastating weapon and king of terror.
Gerard de Nerval's Black Sun is the core of the symbolist counterpoint. The quote, paired with the image of the broken lute, defines profound melancholy. This symbolism inverts hedonism, illustrating that instead of seeking escape, the poet carries the spiritual void inside.
The title, The Unforgiving Light, frames the tension created by time. Miranda's terror is apparent as she wakes on her 30th birthday, reflected in the shattered mirror and the modern quatrain. The sun, a typical marker of time, here forces the immediate and painful realization of aging.
These four powerful symbols define the cosmology of the quatrain. We see the hunter representing action and awakening, the omen conveying destruction and prophecy, the timekeeper embodying science and indifference, and the void summarizing melancholy and ultimate loss within this framework.
We see a dramatic visualization of the fleeting bird of time. The soaring raptor captured mid-flight at sunset underscores the urgency. Though the sun cannot be stopped, the accompanying text reminds us that through powerful, focused prose, we can capture and immortalize that critical moment.